Welcome to the Raising Emotionally Healthy Family Summit. I'm your host, Emily Hamlin, and I am so excited for today's guest, Maryam Munir. Maryam is the founder of the Parent Empowerment Project, an organization devoted to helping South Asian parents and teachers break generational trauma cycles and take care of children with safety and compassion. She's also a proud mom of four and a published author of Cycle Breaker, From Trauma to Triumph. Maryam, welcome.
Thank you so much, Emily. I'm so glad to be here.
Maryam, can you tell us a little bit about your journey? How have you come to be where you are today?
So, I had many years of infertility to deal with before I finally found my son. I like to say that because we got him via IVF. And when you have had that long a time to daydream about having a baby, you fantasize a lot. I'm sure all parents fantasize, but I had about an extra 8 years to do so. And so I was truly in my honeymoon period. I remember saying, I don't know why parents complain about staying up all night with the baby. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. I'll sleep when I die. So I really loved it. I really embraced it. And so I was really shocked when the terrible twos came, which I now like to call the terrific twos, because their brain is so terrific during that time. But they came, and I found myself really losing my temper at my sweet little boy, and even hitting him in like a complete rage. And I was never that kind of a parent who wanted to spank children or believed in spanking or anything like that. So it came from a place of rage. And I remember it took my breath away after I had maybe this third or fourth episode. I remember just thinking like, oh my gosh, this is not normal. Like, this is not okay. And I lived in the US at the time, and one of my best friends was white. And I had seen her where she would just say to her kids, like, it's time for bed. Go to your room. And her son would just listen. And I was like, white people have it figured out. They know how to get stuff done, you know.
If
the same,
only that was not my case, but I understand why you thought it for
yes,
sure.
yes. Well, and she used timeouts, and she had this tone, and her son recognized that tone. And to me, it was fascinating that you could use a tone without raising your voice, and it was all fascinating. And of course, as naive as I was like, oh, there's got to be like a parenting book that white parents follow. So all I have to do is read it and do what it says. So I hit the library one day after a really bad episode. As soon as my husband got home, I was like, please watch him. I'm going to the library. And I got all the parenting books that they had in that aisle. And that's when I realized, like, oh, there's all different things that different authors are saying. And I remember one of the first ones was 1, 2, 3 Magic, which I always hide now when I see it at a bookstore, because I remember trying it, and it works. It really does work. Like, you say 1, 2, 3 and your child does whatever. But also they're terrified. I remember the expression on his little face where he would do what I'm asking, but he'd be terrified. And I was like, oh, that can't be right. That can't be right. So I remember trying all these different things, and that none of them like sat well in my heart. They didn't feel right. I didn't know what I was supposed to do, but I think I knew what I shouldn't be doing. And then at some point, I must have come across what is called Resources for Infant Educare, right? By Majda Gerber and Janet Lansbury. You must have heard of Janet Lansbury. She's, big name. I recently got to interview her, which was very exciting and full circle moment for me. And so I found their work, and that is what really sat with me. And I was like, oh, respectful parenting, like treating infants with respect, like, yes. And so, and then it continues on to toddlerhood. And, so that started my journey. And that's when I started learning, and my relationship with my son, transformed. And it just really felt right. And so then another full circle moment where my white friend would be like, what is this that you're doing? And I was like, well, you're such a wonderful mom, and I feel like you would be beautifully aligned with, if you learn some of this stuff. And she's like, what do you think I'm doing wrong? And I was like, oh, no, I didn't say anything. I mean, maybe other than timeouts, you could, try, a few other things. And she was like, sure, tell me. And she is my bestest friend in the whole wide world. So, she now credits her children I think her eldest is now 18, 18, 12, and 9. And they tell me, Maryam Khala, thanks to you, we don't get timeouts anymore. So I'm like, yes, that's the biggest flex. So, she encouraged me and she was like, Maryam, you've helped, change my perspective. You gotta start teaching other parents. And I was like, really? And this is like, we're talking like 7, 8 years ago. So parent coaching was not really a thing. Even very few people had heard of gentle parenting was not a term that anybody used. But I was like, yeah, I know, I believe in this stuff and I do want to teach it. So I just kind of dove in and started doing these little workshops in my area, like free in the library. Then I would come to Pakistan, I would do them here. And it just all kind of imploded after that, you know.
What a beautiful journey for sure. Um, so many thoughts. I'm curious to know because you do kind of have the cultural differences, living in US, living in Pakistan, and I'm sure that there's cultural differences there. Has it been received well in your country also? Like, are you seeing the generational changes within your country also, as well as the people you've helped so much here in the US?
Yeah, that is such a good question because, I did start my work in the US when I was in the US, and a vast majority of my clients were Pakistani, Indian, South Asian parents living in the US. But I would say, I want to change the trajectory of what we call Desi. So, Desi is a word used for all South Asians, like whether you're Indian or Bangladeshi or Pakistani. And I was like, I want to change the trajectory. And my own people would laugh and say, yeah, like, no, you're not gonna be able to do that, but like at least you're doing it here. And I was like, no, but I want to make a change in our countries and get away from what we call chappal means like the slipper, the Spanish version of chancla, right? So
Yeah.
uh I want to get away from that. And people would just laugh at me and they were like, yeah, no, that's not gonna fly. But shockingly, it has been, if anything, I would say people value my work even more over here because we don't have the kind of resources that people have access to in the US. In the US, you get free parenting classes. Like I attended them. You get them from the county. Sometimes you have to take them if you get some kind of CPS called on you or something. We don't have stuff like that here. So people really, really took this on, and I am just in awe of the work that I have seen Pakistani, India, and Bangladeshi parents doing. It's been amazing, and really a lot of the work is being done by the mothers, which oftentimes their own cup is very empty. So if I hadn't seen it with my own eyes, I would have never believed it. But it's a beautiful thing to witness.
What an incredible impact you're having. That's beautiful. I do have one more question from your journey. You mentioned very vulnerably that, you were even hitting your son and spanking him. And to most parents, it's like the ultimate shame thing that they wouldn't want to admit if they're doing it. And then you changed. How did you go through the repair with your son do you understand what I'm saying? For him to
Yes.
understand that you've truly changed.
Yeah, I think that's such an important part for especially for children because I always think accountability has two pieces. One piece is repair and one piece is change. So even when we change, we like to focus on, but see, I'm so great now. Like now I never hit you, right? Like we just want to focus on that. But the child wants to focus on the repair. They want to focus on that trauma that they still remember. So I remember the first time my son brought it up. He might have been 4 when he first brought it up, and I was like, "How does he even remember that?" I remember feeling really ashamed and just really horrible. But I think I was able to stay present, and I said, "Yes, that must have been very scary for you." And he was like, "Yeah, it was." And it's funny that when when you sit with them in that darkness, it only lasts a couple moments. It's not long. They don't want to hash it out like adults want to do often when you try to repair with them. So I think it might have been a few different times when he mentioned, um, and I just sat with him and I was like, "Yeah, I know. What was that like for you? It must have been weird and confusing that your own mom, your own caretaker has hurt you." And he would just nod or stay quiet, and I was like, "I am so sorry." Like, it's just that those are the things that my brain learned because, my parents didn't know any better either. And so that's what your brain does when it's stressed out. It's not something I ever wanted to do. And I am always learning, always getting better. And he got it and they get it. And sometimes I think I am more traumatized by those events now than my kids are because they rarely ever bring it up, and if I ever bring it up, they're like, "It's fine," it's or like, "We don't remember," or some version of that. But anytime they do, if they ever do, I'm always like, I'm never gonna say it's in the past. Look, I'm different now. No, because to me, they're still processing that pain, and it's okay. We can talk about it.
Mhm. That is so beautiful. So, absolutely, I think you're a fantastic living example of a cycle breaker. Can we dive into that a little bit more? In your words, what would you say a cycle breaker is?
So, you know, I do want to be clear that I think because we're talking about generational trauma, that means it's passed down through different, multiple generations, right? Like my parents were not, they did not become parents thinking like, oh yeah, we're, going to use violence on our children. Like I'm sure they never thought that. Their parents probably didn't think it either, and so on and so forth. So everybody in their own way, shape, or form is a little bit of a cycle breaker, and they're not, they stop doing some of the things that their parents did, which I think is really commendable. And my own even with each of my parents, I can see how they were, little cycle breakers in their own way. And so it's really just stopping a pattern that you encountered, but you mindfully decide like this is not something I want to continue with my own children. And so for me, that was the main, I would say not hitting is really just the tip of the iceberg. I was fortunate enough to learn more on how to have a real relationship with children from the perspective of never using my power or authority as the leading tactic or technique. Like I'm never going to say things like because I said so, or well, I'm the mom. So in Pakistani culture and in Islamic tradition, mothers are especially powerful, even more so than fathers. They get at least three times more respect and more honor. Like there's a reason why I say three times, because it's mentioned many times. Like mother is three times the importance of father, even. And there's another hadith, which is sayings of the Prophet, peace be upon him, which is that the heaven is under your mother's feet. So it's literally serving your mother gives you heaven. So mothers have a lot of power and can get away with murder. Like anything short of murder, I think they can get away with. So if anybody complains about their mother, people are going to be like, she loves you. It's okay. It's not a big deal. I'm sure you've heard that too, even in your culture, right? Like it's mothers get a free pass. So to not use that power and to set it aside and be like, I'm gonna relate to you on a human level, and if I need cooperation from you, I'm gonna collaborate. That to me is true cycle breaking. Is putting aside my authority and leading with love and compassion.
Mm, that's beautiful. I know sometimes parents, when they hear cycle breaking, they're like, but I love my parents, or like, but I appreciate them. And I feel like this is a really good example right here. You very obviously love your mother. You've shared on social media you recently lost her, and that's been a really hard thing for her. You're saying now she did things you've chosen not to repeat. as a parent that you're consciously changing. I'm sure she did some things that you're consciously choosing to do as a parent too. And so cycle breaking, it's really important to me that everyone understands it doesn't mean that we need to like think our parents are horrible. It doesn't mean that we need to cut off ties. It means that we're going to kind of be more intentional with our parenting, that it's not going to be this auto run subconscious parenting, but rather this more aware of what we're choosing to do, the outcome it has for our children, and the way it feels to us, which is important to me also.
Yeah, so very true. And I always remember very humbly that my children are going to continue this path. So one day, if they're ever on a podcast complaining about me, I'm okay with that. I already dress rehearsal that,
Cheer
you
them
know.
on. Yes, I'm so glad.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm prepared for for them to say, well, you didn't break this cycle, or like you could have also done this. And my son, even when he was like, I think as young as 5, said to me, he thought about it one day, like, we were talking about, my parents and me and them. And he said he thought about it and he was like, you're a better parent than your parents, and I will be a better parent than you. And I was
Yeah.
like, yes, absolutely. So, that is what breaking generational trauma is. And, there's also a message in that for us as cycle breakers, that I think we get too hung up on perfection. And I tell people, this didn't start with us, so it cannot end with us. We are one link in the chain. So don't try to be perfect, because that's where people go off path and they're like, I'm done with gentle parenting, I'm done with respectful parenting. And I'm like, you just need to be a little kinder to yourself, if you're in it for the long haul.
Thank you for that reminder. So, if parents right now are feeling like they are parenting in a way that they don't want to continue, maybe they have that rage, maybe they're spanking, maybe they're screaming. My personal cycle I had to break and overcome was yelling as default. Whatever it is, where would you recommend that they start right now?
I think that starting place is the hardest, which is to look within and be like, I'm not a terrible person, but I might be doing some things that are not okay. And I think that step one is the hardest. Or I don't know if, or at some point it's gonna hit you, that you were treated in ways that hurt you. And that's another big mountain for many people, especially again, for I've seen in my community where parents are basically next to God, like, they're
Mhm.
almost divine. There's I don't know if you've seen this animated movie, it's called Red. Like, I think there's a little Asian girl in it, whose name is Red, and I think the show is called Red, or the movie. And she says in the beginning, it's really important to honor our parents, but just not at the cost of honoring ourselves, you know?
Mm.
Or something like, as long as we also honor ourselves. So, yes, we always honor our parents, and I tell people, like, if you're feeling bad about it, don't pray for them. And remember that acknowledging the anything bad that happened to you is not automatically demeaning your parents. You can hold these two truths together. They did the best that they could, or they knew how, or whatever. And well, it hurt you, So I think that's where a lot of people get stuck. And I tell them, it's okay, like, sit with it as long as you need to, and start one, and don't think, if you don't wanna think too much about it, don't think too much about it, but just start a new practice. Like, just start doing something different. Like, I personally started with, validating my children's feelings. I remember feeling a little bit like a Disney movie character when I did that, at first, and it was so unnatural, and it was kind of funny sounding. One of my clients said, "I feel like a therapist when I'm talking to my daughter like this." And I said, "Yes, because we have no neural pathways for this kind of conversation, and it feels weird, it feels uncomfortable. Fake it till you make it." So, start some kind of practice. And it's important to understand that respectful parenting is a bunch of actual techniques that you should learn from either a course on it, or there's a lot of books on it. You can see my book in the bag, the Cycle Breaker. So there are actual techniques. Don't think that respectful parenting or gentle parenting is just asking your child the same thing 5 times. and hoping they'll do it and asking nicely. That's
I know I see a lot of parents. I've been teaching a class right now directly to neurodivergent kids, and I help them understand their brains so that they can better regulate their emotions. And it's so like, I love it when parents send me a message and they're like, I'm learning right alongside my kid. I'm like, well, that's actually one of my goals is that you learn with your kid. Because like you said, Miriam, the parent has such an incredible power, not like, I'm the all powerful Jafar or like has so much power to do good in their family. And as the parent chooses to look within and see, I don't need to like sit in guilt and blame. Actually, I can just start to do something. And as they start to choose to make positive changes and that positive growth, like it completely transforms the parent's life and the family. So I absolutely love that. I love the work that you're doing. And I know everyone wants to hear about your free gift. So tell us about your free gift today.
So, like I said, that respectful parenting is a bunch of techniques, and one of the favorite, questions that people have is, "Well, what about boundaries? How do I get my kid to listen to me?" And I tell them again, shift a little bit go from like listening means obeying to listening means cooperating. So think of how can I get my child's cooperation? And so if you get this free gift, we share in that how to number one, learn to teach your child that emotional regulation piece, like you said you were teaching. And then also how to start setting boundaries in a way where you're not saying the same thing 5 times or where you're not yelling or having to resort to punishment or consequences or gimmicks like sticker charge or whatever. So it'll give you the basics in really simple terms in a really short time. I think it's like an hour and a half long class.
Awesome. So we have the link down there to grab Miriam's free gift. Um, as we wrap this up, do you have one final message you'd like to give to parents about raising emotionally healthy families?
Yeah. So, when you are doing this work, the thing that really might stand in your way is when you make a mistake because you are building new neural pathways. And it's kind of like walking a path in grass, right? Where it takes a while for that path to appear in the grass. Otherwise, it's just like grass everywhere. And if you have an old path already going from your house to, like, say, your friend's house, and one day you're stressed out, you're gonna be more tempted to take that path that's already there, that's already, it, it's familiar, it's visible. So don't be hard on yourself because that's how learning works. You go on the old path, the old neural pathways before you build a new one. So be so gentle with yourself. If it's gentle parenting yourself too, alongside your children. So be really gentle with yourself and hold that grace that you're also giving your children.
Mm. That is so beautiful. Thank you, Miriam, for joining us today.
You're most welcome, Emily. So lovely.